Assalamu alaikum students, welcome to my channel. Students, in this video I am going to highlight the functions and the locations of the cranial nerves present in the human body. There are 12 pairs of the cranial nerves which are passed out through the foramens present in the anterior of the skull. The anterior of the skull has three fossa: anterior cranial fossa, middle cranial fossa and the posterior cranial fossa. Certain foramens are present in these fossae and the certain structures are passed out through these forces. I have discussed in the names, the locations and the structures passes through these foramen in the previous video. I have put the link on the top right corner of this video in the I button. You can go and watch the complete video. After watching, you will have complete concept of the location, the names and the structures passes through these foramens present in the anterior of the skull. But in this video, I will focus on the functions and the locations of the cranial nerves present in the anterior that are passed through the foramens present in the anterior of the skull. So number one, first cranial nerve is also called the olfactory nerve, which is responsible for the transmission of the sense of smell. It is passed out through the foramen, that is cribriform plate. Then the second cranial nerve, which is called the optical nerve, it is responsible for the transmission of the visual information to the brain. So it has the sight sensation. Second cranial nerve, which is passed through the optical canal. Third, fourth and sixth cranial nerves are called the oculomotor, trochlear and Eplains. These cranial nerves are passed through the superior orbital fissure, which is present at the junction of the anterior cranial fossa and the middle cranial fossa. Oculomotor cranial nerve innervates the eye muscle, so eyes moves and the pupil moves due to the innervation of the third cranial nerve, that is oculomotor. Trochlear cranial nerve, which is the fourth cranial nerve, innervates the superior oblique muscle, so it is also concerned with the movement of the eyes. Then the fifth cranial nerve. Fifth cranial nerve is called the trigeminal nerve and it has three divisions. First division, second division and the third division. The first division of the fifth cranial nerve passes out through the superior orbital fissure. The second division of the fifth cranial nerve passes through the foramen rotundum and the foramen ovale is responsible for the passage of the third division of the fifth cranial nerve, that is trigeminal nerve. The trigeminal nerve is concerned with the as it perceives the sensation from the face and innervates the muscles of the mastication. And then the sixth cranial nerve. Sixth cranial nerve is passed out from the superior orbital fissure. It innervates the lateral rectus muscle. So sixth cranial nerve. Then the seventh cranial nerve. Seventh cranial nerve is also called the facial nerve. It passes from the internal acoustic meatus, which is present at the junction of middle cranial fossa and the posterior cranial fossa. The seventh cranial nerve provides the motor innervation to the muscles of the facial expression. It is very important cranial nerve for the anatomical based knowledge of the medical science. Then the eighth cranial nerve. Eighth cranial nerve is called the vestibulocochlear nerve. It is passed out through the internal acoustic meatus. The eighth cranial nerve senses the sound, rotation and the gravity. So hearing and balance sensation is the function of the eighth cranial nerve, that is vestibulocochlear nerve. Then moving toward the ninth cranial nerve. Ninth cranial nerve is also called the glossopharyngeal nerve. Glossopharyngeal nerve, it has motor and the sensory function. Motor function of the ninth cranial nerve is pharyngeal musculature and the sensory function of the glossopharyngeal nerve is that it controls the posterior part of the tongue, tonsil, so taste and swallow is the function of the ninth cranial nerve, that is glossopharyngeal nerve. Then moving toward the 10th cranial nerve, it is called the vagus cranial nerve. It is passed out through the jugular foramen, which is present in the posterior cranial fossa. The 10th cranial nerve is concerned with the regulation of the many aspects such as heart rate, lungs, and the digestion process. Its sensory function is that it senses the heart, lungs, bronchi, and the external air. So the 10th cranial nerve or the vagus cranial nerve helps to regulate many aspects including the heart rate, lungs, and the digestion process. Then moving toward the 11th cranial nerve. The 11th cranial nerve is also called the accessory cranial nerve. The accessory nerve, it controls the sternocleidomastoid and the trapezius muscle. Thus, it moves the head. 11th cranial nerve that is passed out from the jugular foramen. It is responsible for the controlling of the movement of the head. Then moving toward the last or 12th cranial nerve. The 12th cranial nerve is also called the hypoglossal cranial nerve. Hypoglossal nerve. It is the nerve that provides the motor innervation to the muscles of the tongue. Therefore, the tongue moves by the innervation of the 12th cranial nerve. 12th cranial nerve is passed out through the hypoglossal canal that is present at the periphery of the foramen magnum. So these all are